Welcome back to our study in the two letters Paul wrote to Timothy. We're in the second chapter of the first letter, and in our last session, Paul instructed the men that when they pray to raise their hands and humble themselves before God. And this can be a literal thing as well as just a spiritual thing, but it's a way of identifying yourself before God as open, trusting Him in everything, and being humble in your prayers. We go on to see Paul here instruct the women specifically in some things. Chapter 2, verse 9. Likewise, I want women to adorn themselves with proper clothing, modestly and discreetly, not with braided hair, gold or pearls or costly garments, but rather by means of good works, as befits women making a claim to godliness. Well, anytime we see specific things that Paul says to men or women in the culture and the society that they live in, it's very important that we not try to duplicate exactly what he's saying, but find the truth that he's promoting and then bring that into our culture in a very specific way. The classic example here is braided hair. Paul doesn't mean that women shouldn't braid their hair. He's saying very clearly what is going on in the community that Timothy is ministering in. And he was in Ephesus. And he wants to make a distinction between the women who are Christians and those who are not. And the temple prostitutes that worked in the Greco-Roman god system all braided their hair as an identification that they were a temple prostitute that could be hired and therefore benefit financially to the various gods in the various temples of the pagans. And so he doesn't want people to look like that. Of course, as you can well imagine, those same women who braided their hair adorned themselves very scantily and improperly and immodestly. And Paul is simply cutting to the chase. The truth here is that the women in our culture are not to look like prostitutes. They're to dress modestly and present themselves in a very godly way. And this helps support their testimony as a Christian. Ironically, one of the other things that it addresses in some of the language that's used here in the word discreetly is the issue of not looking like a man. Women should be women and men should be men. God created us, and we're going to talk about that in our next session, but God created us specifically to be men and to be women. And that's two genders that work together in support and love with strengths and weaknesses in both sides. But he says here that the women who do this are exercising good works. When you don't appear to be a prostitute, you don't appear to be someone who is easy, as we would probably say it in our culture, and you dress modestly, you're presenting an image of godliness. And that's very important, and that's the truth underneath it. It's not the braiding of hair, it's not gold and pearls and costly garments that are the issue. It's what those garments represent in the culture and the society. And so when we get to the bottom of these discussions and we find the truth, then we apply that to our lives. Now, does this mean that women in our culture, Christian women, can't dress nice and wear good clothes? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that we should avoid looking like something we're not and shouldn't appear to be like that at all. We'll pick up there in our next session.